Back to the podcast. My name is Phil, and I'm joined today by someone I haven't seen for many years who I'm connected through AEE. We actually served on a committee in the Northeast together, and I'm excited to hear what's going on in his life. But I'm joined by Devin Farkas. Devin, thank you for being willing to jump on this and chat about you and your life and what's happening. I'm almost tempted to use like the Terry Borton model of like what, so what, now what in this conversation, because I feel like that might like lead us in a good direction. So the what is like, what have you been up to? What are you doing currently? And I believe there's a new venture for you. So maybe describe some of that.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Phil. And it's great to talk with you. Thanks for inviting me on. So yeah, I am starting a new venture. My website is workwithdevin.com because what else should I call it?
Yeah.
Essentially, I'm endeavoring to help any program, college, university, high school, private school, public school, community organization, um, any program that has learning outcome goals, utilize outdoor spaces and experiential activities to better reach those outcome goals. That's like in short. The problem that I see is that the outdoors is actually quite accessible, and I think as an outdoor industry, have made it inaccessible to the point that it's no longer seen as, yeah, let's just go pop outside. No, we're constantly asked the question, why go outside? But we're never asked the question, why stay inside? And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity that's readily present for a lot of organizations, and I'm hopeful to help those organizations use outdoor spaces and experiential tools to better reach their goals.
Yeah, I know your history and your past is centered around like the college industry and your work in the college. Is there stuff that you saw when you were working in college that like reinforced that belief in you that there's inaccessible outdoor programming?
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, it's a little bit of a critique of myself and the work that I've done in the programs that I've worked for, and thinking about, is what I'm providing better called adventure recreation than outdoor education? And I think that a lot of programs kind of harness the shiny, flashy pictures of, sea kayaking in Baja California, and then utilize that as a advertisement for outdoor education. And I will say that those experiences are amazing and they are incredibly impactful for who gets to go on them. And when that's the standard for what outdoor education looks like, it makes it inaccessible to the majority of people that could benefit from it. And so I've actually done a lot of work in at different universities in different spheres. So at Bowdoin College, I was working for the Outing Club, which was a student-run club. At St. Lawrence University, I was working for the Outdoor Programs Department, which is an academic department. And now I'm at UVM and I work within Student Life, which is a student serving arm of the university. And so viewing it in all of those different aspects has been really helpful in identifying what it is that's most impactful about outdoor experiences and how to provide those impactful experiences to the broadest audience possible.
It's interesting because I think like the challenge course industry has come against this in the last 10 years also with the flashy aerial adventure parks that get put out there for the commercial entities. And I think that we always struggle, like adventure ed, outdoor ed has always struggled with the marketing side of our industry. Like, how do we actually promote the value of what we do without having to make it seem wow and flashy to draw people in? And in turn, what we've done maybe has limited accessibility by having the flashy visuals and saying that that is a representation of what we do, because that just, it's not truly what we are often doing. What would you say is the, from your perspective, is the impacts of outdoor education? What do you see as being the core impacts that you've seen despite the flashiness?
Man, how much time do we have, Phil?
Yeah, let's
Yeah. I'll try to keep it to three broad topics. So I see my participants gain an incredible amount of confidence through developing skills that they didn't know that they could develop. Specifically, those skills are related to getting outside, which is a great way to have an active lifestyle and utilize a resource that is readily available to most people. Even if you're in a city, there's parks. Walking on the street is physically active. You do hear and see birds. So it's still the outside. I see my students gaining confidence through skill building. I see them connecting with each other in a way that they don't otherwise connect, whether it's interference from phones or advertising. They have a great opportunity to connect with each other. And then they connect with the natural world. So they get a better sense of where they live and what the ecosystem is around them, what benefits it brings to them, and how they can be an active part of that ecosystem. Um, I said I was going to keep it to three buckets, and then I rambled a little bit. So
It's okay.
those buckets would be skill development, interpersonal connection, and connection with the natural world.
And I think that when we look at those primary, like those trio, I think we can have that in so many different capacities. It's just it doesn't need to be these massive trips that people take go on. Um,
Yeah,
well, yeah,
so I think what I see is um, a focus on providing an experience as, or sorry, not as the goal in and of itself. So create the most incredible learning experience possible. And what that looks like is, yeah, we should go rock climbing in Spain, which guilty as charged. I ran a rock climbing trip in Spain, and it was an amazing, impactful experience. But all of our work is rooted in the experiential learning cycle, of which concrete experience is one of a 4-step cycle. And the ultimate goal of that cycle is to achieve some kind of learning outcome. And so if the goal is the experience, we're then kind of like post hoc rationalizing, yeah. And by going on this awesome experience, we'll learn all these cool things. Instead of saying, okay, well, what we really want is for students, and I'm thinking college students right now, is for students to develop the skill to communicate with one another in a face-to-face manner and work through interpersonal conflict. So how do we do that? Well, we definitely need to equip them with a concrete tool for interpersonal communication and conflict mediation. Okay, great. So we have a tool to give them. How do we teach them how to use that tool? Well, we're probably going to need to put them in an experience where they have to relate with one another and work through conflict. But if we just make them have conflicts with one another, there's no guarantee that they'll use the tool. So we should probably guide them through some kind of reflection of that experience and show them how they can generalize it with the tool that we've provided them. And that brings us to the experiential learning cycle of, okay, what's the concrete experience where they will be faced with a conflict that we can then reflect on what happened in that conflict. We can then generalize working through that conflict with an abstract tool, some kind of a conflict mediation tool, and then prepare them for the next opportunity to practice that. And that doesn't have to be on a month-long expedition in Alaska. That can be in a 2-hour session using portable materials in a high school gymnasium. I think that ropes courses do it really well, but there are great people doing it really well in high school gymnasiums. But ultimately, as long as we're focusing in on what is the skill that we want our students to come away with, how do we best teach them that skill through the experiential learning process? And then that leads us to what kind of experience would be a route for learning through that process.
I think that for a lot of educators who are listening, you've probably had like over time, over experience, you've realized that the ropes course or these kind of extreme experiences are only one tool in the toolkit that we're using. And it's like reducing that toolkit, just like how facilitators get their tool bag of like all their props, reduce it, reduce it, reduce it. I think we can reduce the overall experience. I'm going to say something. I wonder if you reflect on this because this is what I was thinking. I was actually thinking of this yesterday. I was talking to some educators who I was teaching level 2 skills to, and we were talking about the heights of climbs. And typically now as an org, we build stuff in the 20, 30 feet range. We are very infrequently building stuff above that. And I think that what has changed is that we are, as an industry, growing into a more understanding of the pedagogy of the educational portions of what we do and not being like as an individual, as an adult who's going to maybe take groups or any other group, how do I make it cool for me? Because I think that a lot of educators, I think about this maybe with like college professors, also in the outdoor realms, they may be like, I want it to be valuable for me also. So I want it to be really tall. I think about some of the higher climbs in challenge courses. We added other elements to make it harder for the people who already could do it really well. Like if you do a leap of faith or a power pole, they added a trapeze bar, even though the pole was the challenge, because they wanted to make it even more challenging. And we don't need that anymore because we realize like we don't need to make it even more challenging because people are already finding challenge in some of the more limited ways. Have you experienced that from your perspective as you've grown older in the industry too? Of like, I don't, it maybe it was more about I wanted a cool thing that would have been cool for me, but I don't need to make it cool for others. It's already cool if we just go outside.
Yes, is the short answer. I mean, my main goal in originally getting into outdoor education was like, hey, I could work a job where I get to be outside, and it's education, it's helping people. That's great. But yeah, like a main component of that was like, hey, this is a cool, fun job, and that led me to doing a lot of really awesome programming, a rock climbing trip in Spain, ecotourism trip in Costa Rica, week-long downriver canoe trips in Canada, doing really cool stuff. But the problem that I saw with all of those programming is it was a really cool experience, but the actual tangible leadership skills that I said students would gain by going on this trip, I started feeling more and more like I couldn't defend that because I was taking them into an environment that required my high level of certification, skill, and experience to guide them through safely. And so at most of the points that required challenging decision making, I was in charge because the level of risk required me being there. So now at the program that I'm working at UVM, we go backpacking and flat water canoeing. We just did a really cool Nordic ski tour, but they're all designed as such that the risk involved doesn't require a ton of experience, a mountain of experience and training in order to make the core decisions, because that's where the value is in a leadership development program is putting the participants in the driver's seat wholly and fully, because regardless of what decisions they make, it's not a safety concern. Whereas on a backcountry ski tour, yeah, it's a safety concern. On a mountaineering expedition, it is a safety concern. Many, many, many more people are capable of doing an outdoor leadership program where the level of risk is a flat water canoeing trip than a mountaineering expedition. And so this is not to discount the value of a mountaineering expedition. The students that have the skills to then challenge themselves in that kind of decision making environment, yeah, that is going to be a more rich experience for them than if they were on a flat water canoeing trip. But there are many more people that are capable of being in that environment in a flat water canoeing trip. And so building a leadership program that's focused around an activity that many more people have access to means that I don't need to be on every trip. I'm not the bottleneck, and many more people have access to it. So I now find much more value in trips that and programs that I would have fun doing with my 5-year-old because it's just I don't know. Yeah, I think it's the value that I see in the programming is in the development of the students much more than how intense is it, how much of a um, growth experience because it's an amazing adventure for the participants. I'm much more focused on the actual, like, you need to develop through having conflict with your co-leader in the group around what you should do today. And that can happen for a lot of people on a canoeing trip.
To use an example on a low element, we don't typically, and we'll train if they still have them, but we don't build trustful platforms anymore because the risk, when you consider the risk versus the value of it, when people get dropped, there's no trust in that situation. And I can teach trust in a much safer environment that's more accessible, that doesn't require someone to close their eyes and fall backwards into the waiting arms of their friends. That need isn't there anymore. So I think that we are almost like, how do we take the things that were just for the coolness factor and refining them and saying like, how do we make stuff that's a little bit more accessible? I interviewed someone recently, a professor out of England called Dr. Colin Beard, and he has honestly that there's a phrase I'm going to say to you, and it really reframed experiential learning for me. He's not trying to redefine. He's written books on experiential learning, but he says rather than it being how do we learn from an experience, it's actually how do we create the best experience to maximize the learning. So it's almost like they're just flipping those words around a little bit. And for me, that's completely changed a little bit how I consider some of the programs I do. I'm actually trying to create a great experience to learn. I'm not creating an experience and then hoping we learn from that. It's just a kind of just slight reframe there. Is there any, like, can you think of any specific stories or moment? You mentioned your trip to Spain a couple of times already, but any experiences where you've seen the value of that experiential learning cycle model, like, come into fruition in a real captured way?
Yeah. So I actually just wrote a blog post about this, but in March, I took a group of students to the Chic-Chocs in Quebec. Amazing experience. We went rustic hut to rustic hut. We were Nordic skiing the whole time. So the like technical skill required was low. Risk was relatively low. We were going to huts every night where there are wood burning stoves. So we didn't, the pressure of getting to camp at a time where you can build a snow shelter and all of that risk was couched, which is really awesome. Um, Before the expedition, we have a number of class sessions. One of them is on leadership styles. We specifically use the situational leadership model. Excuse me. So on this trip, one of my students asked, what leadership style are you using right now? What leadership style are the leaders of the day using? Is it right? Like, what do you think about that? And they were asking because we were having a pretty challenging day physically and mentally because we didn't expect it to be physically challenging. And the group was struggling. And my student wanted to know, like, is there something about the leadership that could be different? The style that the co-leaders were using, is there something that they could be doing differently? They were going to be co-leading the next day, which is why they were curious. And they wanted to know, is there anything that I could do differently? And so then that night, we were able to facilitate a reflection with the leaders of the day around the situational leadership model that we had taught on selling, telling, participating, delegating as 4 different styles of leadership. The leaders that day were telling that we needed to speed up our breaks, telling us that we had so many more miles to go, telling us that we really needed to keep moving, telling us that we weren't on our time plan, that we were going to be late. It was just leading to a level of anxiety within the group. Excuse me. And my encouragement was, really a selling leadership style would be more appropriate. The buy-in of the group was in order to finish the task was pretty high. Like the group needed to be motivated to get to where they were going. And it was pretty important that they got to where they were going. So the risk involved of not actually getting to where we were going was pretty high. We needed to make it to our hut. So they needed to be selling us on the idea of getting to our hut and not just telling us what we needed to be doing. The student, but we were able to utilize that conceptual model of situational leadership to facilitate our reflection around what worked well and what didn't work well that challenging day, to then prepare the students who are leading the following day for their turn to actively experiment with situational leadership. And I said, I think that a selling leadership model would be better. It's going to be a challenging day tomorrow. The group is capable of it, but they really need to be bought in to your vision of success in order to feel motivated. You can't just tell them we have to get up at 5 a.m. because it's going to be a really hard day. Telling them that after having a really hard day today is just going to lead to mutiny. And so the leader for the following day, they were able to sell the group on what needed to happen. They facilitated a conversation about, hey team, tomorrow's going to be challenging, but we can do it. It's not impossible. We've all demonstrated the skills that we need to get to where we're going. As long as we stay on track and we keep our breaks to well-managed times and we keep our attitude positive, we can do it. We're going to need to get up at 6. It's going to be hard, but I know that we can do it. That night, pre-session prep was well received. The group was like, okay, yeah, we can do that. And then during the following day, the co-leaders maintained that selling kind of leadership style, that fuel. We made it to camp exactly when they anticipated us getting, and morale was high the entire time.
Mm.
And so then we then used that as an example for facilitating our feedback on what worked well, what didn't work well for the day. So that was a big story, but at the outset, before the experience, we taught them about situational leadership. How do you decide between a leadership style based on how much buy-in is required of the group and how much risk there is involved with the task being done correctly? Then in the moment, we had an experience where I'll say it, the wrong leadership style was used to match the situation, to then fuel a conversation around what leadership style would have better matched. And then the students used that feedback session to plan out how to lead the next day, and then used it, and it worked well. So it was really, I mean, I got like chills when I was thinking about like how well like the day went. I'm like, wow, this is really, not only is this a good example of situational leadership, but it's a great example of how the situational leadership model can like spiral out and build on itself to really hone in on that learning moment of how do we lead a group well.
I'm intrigued if you, as you reflect on the story, because I think the energy, the chills, is somewhat centered on the experience that the students were having. But I want to highlight maybe something that you were demonstrating in that role of the group leader that I wonder if you could talk about. How did you allow, because I think that the need, and experience this a lot with educators, the need for a group to stretch is that the facilitator needs to take that step back to allow the discomfort to set in, so that then you can reflect on the discomfort without circumnavigating and be like, I'm uncomfortable. I'm just going to nip this right in the bud, and I don't want this to get uncomfortable. You allowed a day of leadership, which you described as not the best leadership, to play out so you could reflect on it. What advice would you give to educators who might be in a role where they're guiding a group, and how did you manage to relinquish your control over that situation and allow that to play out the way it did?
That's a great question, Phil. One of the things that is tying back to your earlier question about what have I learned through my experience, and your story about the super high elements versus the medium high elements. One of the reasons that I like being on trips that the relative risk is low is so that I can fully step back. I'm in an environment where I know what is and isn't truly hazardous, so that when I see the slip ups and the trip ups happen, I know which ones I need to intervene in and which ones I can just step back and let happen. And I think that's one of the hazards in going for those like massive expeditions that require highly trained professionals to be there to manage the risk for the participants, is that you don't have that opportunity. But on this expedition, my own training and experience far surpasses what is needed to lead a successful day, so that I can sit back comfortably and watch what's happening to know when are we actually getting into a hazardous situation. I also know that one of the things that we teach in our program is self leadership. How do you take care of yourself so that you can be a good leader or just a good participant on the trip. So when I used to go on expeditions and feel like, you know what, I'm part of the team. I'm going to eat dinner with them. I'm going to, whatever they cook, I'm going to eat. Wherever they sleep, I'm going to sleep. And there's great value in that. And I know that I need to take care of my own well-being in order to be the best instructor that I can. So like my pockets are loaded down with the snacks and treats that I know keep me happy and positive, so that when it's not a safety concern that we haven't stopped to eat, but I'm going to eat something because I'm getting hangry. So I know myself and what I need as a trip leader to be well, so that I'm not feeling, because I'm uncomfortable, I need to step in, and I can make sure that I'm comfortable without making a decision for the group, to then take a step back and see what does the group actually need. Does that make
Yeah.
sense?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm thinking that from a perspective of the educator, be okay doing the activities or leading a flow that is below the experience that you have because it gives you a sense of confidence. And once you gain more experience, then you can do what you might be seen as the risky or more technical when it's come to technical skills thing. I was talking to someone yesterday about specialty elements like what staff should I staff on my zip line or my swing or my squirrel or my pamper pole. And I said it should ultimately be someone who has a level of experience where they feel comfortable and can manage the group rather than being hyper focused on the technical safety components, because then you forget all the rest. And that's what you're suggesting here. It's like, don't overcomplicate the risk only for you to distract yourself from the actual group dynamics that are happening that you can reflect upon. That, which is the richness of the program. The richness doesn't come in you showing off how technically gifted you are and how many certifications you have. That is ultimately not benefiting the groups we work with. And I think that that kind of aligns with what we've been suggesting. We've touched on so much on the what and also the so what. So I'm going to like end us with what the now what. And it's just what do you anticipate being? It's like a future goal. What do you anticipate the future of outdoor education being with this kind of mindset that there's a lot of people who are starting to challenge the ways that we've done things in the past in a really positive way. The critic is the greatest optimist. I say that often on the podcast. So what do you consider the future of outdoor education?
What a question, Phil.
Yeah.
um, I mean, I definitely agree. When I was in grad school, I got really, really critical of outdoor education and started feeling like, is this even the right field? Like I'm learning all of these reasons that what we're doing is not actually helpful. And then one of my faculty said something similar, that like, if you truly love something, you will be a very harsh critic of it because you want it to do better. And so that's where I feel. I feel like I'm in that mode. I think the future of outdoor education is in reducing or eliminating the barriers that we as the outdoor industry put on outdoor education. I think we have defined for everyone what outdoor education is, and we've set the bar too high. I think that outdoor education looks like education outside and not just amazing outdoor adventure experiences. Yeah, and when that happens, any school, not just the forest preschools, uses the outdoor spaces around them as part of their learning environment. They use the parks as a regulation tool for mental health concerns. They utilize the things that are freely accessible to us as public spaces to enhance their programming. They're not focusing on what more money do I need to implement an amazing outdoor experience. They're saying, given the limited budget I have, how can I enrich the learning experience? We can just go outside.
No, I think that's a beautiful hope, and I'm very much aligned with that. If you are listening to this and you are also resonating, I encourage you to check out workwithdevin.com. I will put the link in the description so you can check out more, find out all the resources and the help and support that Devin can offer to you in your programs. And thank you, Devin, for being willing to chat with me on the podcast.